this study session for Littleton Planning Commission. Dennis, will you call the roll first?
Commissioner Balthasar.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Present.
Commissioner Iteria.
Here.
Commissioner Nicholson. Here. Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
Commissioner Samuelson.
Here.
Commissioner Stadopoulos is not here, told us he could not make it tonight.
Okay. So 6 present. Okay, before we start, do any of the commissioners wish to amend the agenda, add items? Julio?
I would. I'd like to introduce a conversation piece just before we got into the whole agenda. I would like to know that if I could add something for the March 23rd meeting, and what it is, and it looks like it's already there, it's called Planning Academy. I wanted to see if we could have Tom Christopike spend about a half hour to discuss that particular item early on so that we could review it, and look at it, and talk about it, etc. Half hour on the 23rd. I just wanted to bring it up. I didn't realize when I got this that it was already there.
Tom's here tonight, so if we didn't want to have just a brief introduction to it before the 23rd, we could do that as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to take a vote on this, but is the commissioner or the commissioners willing to entertain Mr. Christopite for a few minutes as a preamble to the 23rd presentation?
Absolutely.
I'm having a hard time with the sound system tonight. My own sound system isn't quite that sophisticated, but anyway. As you know, Kent talked a lot about Planning Academy and came to the pub and talked about it and suggested it seemed to get good response, so I tended to follow through. And I've outlined a Planning Academy based on a little bit of a survey of 3 other communities. Wheat Ridge, Lakewood, and Aurora all have one. And most of them focus on what I'd call the process, the planning process. And I've added 2 parts to that, one at the beginning and one at the end. The one at the beginning is just an overview of what cities are all about historically and economically, and to some extent also the context of Littleton and the metropolis. You know, I'm one of those guys that spent some time with COG, and so I kind of always have this metropolitan framework, and I think it's kind of important because there's a lot of factors that affect Littleton and that. Then at the end, I also listed in my draft about a half a dozen topics, including, by the way, historic preservation and neighborhood preservation that some of you have mentioned to me, so that we've done there's a total of 10 weeks for this, which I'll get to in a minute. And so 2 of them would be this introductory stuff, and then the 6 in the middle would be this process that you're all familiar with, the comp plan, the legal start, and so forth. And then at the end, any 2 of 10 topics that the group that's there at that academy might want to discuss. So I like to make it interactive and make sure that everybody gets some discussion, some choice about what they study or what we talk about. So as I just mentioned, the academy would be 10 weeks long, and if I had my own choice, it would run from the week of Labor Day right up to Thanksgiving. There's just exactly 10 weeks in there. So you could do it once a week on Wednesday night, and then in the subsequent years, if it's a success and it goes on like that, 2 planning academies, one in the spring and one in the fall, maybe in that same period, Labor Day to Thanksgiving. And in the spring there's a little more flexibility. Finally, I would also like to mention, before I forget, that I would like to conduct I'll call it a brief preview of the Planning Academy with all of you to fine-tune it and to get your feedback and make sure that we're on the same page. And so that I'd like to schedule that sometime, between now and Labor Day, so whatever works out for you. I think I've covered most of the things. I'd appreciate the 2 things from you. One of them is the a review and endorsement and a recommendation to council to, in effect, contract with me to run the academy. And secondly, I haven't talked much about this, and I've met with a couple of you, but there's really a pretty sizable commitment on the part of the staff, starting with Suzanne and Dennis and Jan, as we discuss various parts of the process. They're very familiar with a lot of detail that I'm not familiar with. So as we went through this process, I think they'd be involved at least once in one of those sessions. So be glad to answer any questions you have about it.
Who do you, and I guess drawing on the other municipalities, you mentioned Wheat Ridge, Lakewood, Aurora, I think if I heard correctly, who do you target? Do you target people already involved? Are you trying to get people from homeowners associations? Is this the training ground for planning commissioners, perhaps? I know some of us came into this pretty cold, pretty uneducated about planning commission, with only principles to back us up. And how do they go about recruiting people into this? 10 weeks is a commitment. You probably don't find, on every block in the community. So where do you find the people to participate?
The best I know is that each of these communities had a pretty open invitation to anybody and everybody. Some of them, they had different flavors to it. I remember specifically that Wheat Ridge's commission, Planning Academy, was actually run by a group like BIAC. It was a kind of an economic development group in the city, and they conducted it. So I suspect that there was a little bit of a flavor that way, but I don't know for sure. In Aurora, they ran it over and over, and it was just open to all the citizens. And same in Lakewood. Lakewood, I mean, they had a 3-inch binder like this, and it had more information and more detail, and it was really quite extensive. So they got a little different.
What kind of
flavor.
participation are they seeing, Tom?
They were the number.
Number, right.
I don't know the total numbers that they had, but I think that they had a fairly regular attendance, of 25 people coming through, and some of them I think ran at least 2 a year, and some might have run 3.
And similar time frame, 8 to 10 weeks?
Yeah, and I think they actually spaced them out just a little bit. Sometimes it'd be every other week for a long period of time, and that's an option too. As Norm mentions, it's you kind of commit 10 Wednesdays in a row. You've said something, you're going to miss one.
Yeah. Did they do a completion certificate or something at the end of that for those?
Oh, they do different things for, they have certificates, and some have kind of elaborate, programs for that. But and like our police academy, they have certificates and frames and alumni association, and I haven't thought a whole lot about that. In fact, I'd like your feedback on some of that stuff. And I think one of them, it might have been the one in Wheat Ridge. I think they have dinner. They have a dinner starting at 5:30 and go to 6:30 and then start in on the academy. So there's lots of options.
Tom, you're right. We've been talking about this for, 9 months now since Kent first brought it up. So I haven't heard any discouraging words from anybody up to now. I think we're really looking forward to hearing your presentation on the 23rd.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody has any ideas, by the way, don't be afraid to call me. You know how to get me.
Okay. Other additions to the agenda before we actually get into the agenda?
Just one announcement. I believe, unless something has changed, tomorrow night, the council study session includes the BIAC report, which I think was aging gracefully, some form of that. Looks like Linda perhaps has a report for us. But I've been hopeful that we would have some input. Most of our hearings have involved a senior residence of some sort. All the demographics and where there are senior residences now located in the city, where they're located. Are they in one area? Are there areas left out? What's the anticipated need? All those things I'm hopeful that they will give us some clue about, because I suspect we will see more of these hearings and more of these issues, and maybe we can understand a little bit more about it.
Sounds like the kind of summary we could have benefited from having 2 weeks ago.
Or even 6 months ago. Yeah.
And the report just came out last Friday, and it's posted on the website for anybody who's interested in reading it.
Okay, no further additions. Let's get into the agenda. Primarily public outreach and the survey. We have, I understand, sample surveys, and I think the plan, Dennis, was to, we're going to beta test the survey, is that right?
We're going to test the survey, so if you go through it with a pen or pencil, fill it out. It's a great way to kind of get to know Ron,
We're going to tabulate it when we make a news release.
Which means everybody at home gets to watch us read and write for the next few minutes.
This is corrected per the subcommittee. Well, we've been making lots of changes and working with Bob a lot on this. The only thing that hasn't been changed is the map on the back. We still have some changes we want to make to that. But our traffic sign was out on Thursday, Friday last week. So it'll be back tomorrow. We'll get this sheet together.
Hope we wanted it up there.
Seconds.
Yeah, well, you want to bring a positive. You gotta start at the most important and work your way down. That's what we got to hold Kelly about.
Is it good? It may not be readable. Are you collecting them?
No, no, we're gonna use them to discuss.
What color are you gonna do back here? You tell them about what color you're gonna do.
Coloring page.
Well, I wanted to do a different color from the blue.
Make a hot print of that.
That's what they haven't had a chance to do yet. It looks kind of like a road.
Black and blue do look a lot alike.
Are we done?
Or purple.
Next thing I handed out before we get into the questions.
It took about 4.5 minutes.
Not bad.
You wanna put that in the newspaper maybe?
Yeah, that's great. What I just handed out was a schedule that we worked on, Bob and I put together for what we need in order to get to the open house, the questionnaire in, working with Kelly and Chris on this. February 23rd is the meeting tonight. We're doing this last meeting where we actually talked about this March 9th tonight, and then we need to really have it completed tonight. The survey is actually going to be printed between the 16th and the 20th, same schedule as the Wilson report. Mail preparation is the 25th, and then actually mailed out 26th, 27th. And it'll start arriving on Tuesday and Wednesday, March 31st and 31st. And the deadline for return is the 7th. We've actually changed that now. We've moved it, bumped it up to the 14th. And then planning for study session will be on the 27th, where Bob will be presenting the raw numbers at that point. And then on May 11th, Monday, we have the open house where we actually present that back to the public and have discussion in terms of the results as well as additional issues that people see and full discussion in terms of where we are in the process. So that's the time schedule we're on. The additional information on that is that we really, at this point, with the committee working on this and staff working on this, and the planning commission having worked on this as a whole, we really can't stand to make major changes to what we can do unless there's something that really is a live or die that you see. We can change that. We have additional changes we know we need to make to the map. But Chris and Kelly both are fully inundated as of today with getting the report ready because it's due on the same schedule. So they are now writing like crazy articles will do today. So we're working on that. So hopefully everything's in pretty good shape. Distribution will be an insert in the Olson report. There are about 22,000 households and businesses that it goes out to. An additional 1,000 copies are distributed to the library. And we probably will look at doing a different color insert for the ones that are actually distributed so you get a sense of where they went. So when they're going to the library, museum, other businesses, we'll have a different color questionnaire, so when they come back in, we can actually tabulate those a little differently and kind of see where they went, which I think will help too. And then I think the same thing, if we look at it, if we go out and start doing these intense interviews with people, those can be a different color too, so we could go out and have to separate all these different sets of information and get it back. Given that, I guess your response, reaction to the survey, did we cover big issues, give enough room for people to give us feedback?
Before you get into the actual survey, which I'm willing to talk about, when you get into the colors, you might want to also label on the various colored where it's going, or if it's going out or whatever, so that when you get it back, whoever, if it's not just you or somebody else, can look at it and organize it or whatever. You know, just as a simple data thing.
Which I think what Bob was talking about too, and so the ones that are inserted as opposed to the ones that are.
If you're going to have different colors, then just have a little comment or a note on the bottom of it for you, so that whoever brings them back, and if you're not in or somebody else is doing it, that may not be as close to it as you are, then they can figure out if it's coming in or going out or wherever the heck it came from.
Okay. And Bob's actually going to be, these companies are actually doing, they're the date, the address to be sent to, so they'll be doing all the analysis and tabulation on it, so they're the ones that we actually said that we can do that. So general comments?
Were we going to do the north-south quadrant location on the map, or was that making it too complicated?
We simplified the map a lot already. And right now, the problem is just to leave it kind of open in terms of where people self-identifying where they live.
By what their own perceptions of where they live.
Okay, no problem.
And I think for the most part, we'll be pretty accurate there.
I had made a note from last time on question 4, when do you spend the most time downtown? I think we discussed it, maybe I just thought of it later, but weekend and adding a box for weekend. I think that response, if that can be added now, that tells us something about parking, because if it's weekends that people show up, if they say there's not a problem and they show up on weekends, perhaps that doesn't cross the border to weekday parking and so on. So perhaps we can add that box if that's, what does everybody else think? I think there's a delineation there between people that come on the weekend, perhaps ride light rail down to a Rockies game and then have dinner before, go to a bar afterwards, because they leave in the third inning, the Rockies are ahead by 20, whatever the case might be. So with the agreement of the board, I guess.
I think we all pretty much agreed with that 2 weeks ago. So.
Okay.
We've got a good variety of questions, I think. A lot more open-ended than we initially anticipated having for Bob's comfortable.
I think in some cases that will result in people marking two boxes. I don't know what to do about that, but that gets really confusing in the tabulation.
I'm sorry, which one was that?
If we do weekend, number 6, they may do morning weekend, afternoon weekend.
There's one way to handle it, but it would add a line, I hate to say.
Be weekday, weekday.
And that's to put a bracket on top of 1 through 5, so that in other words, I think some people would say weekends and then hit afternoon also.
Even though they say, please mark only one?
And it says most.
Could you do it as saying weekday and then morning, noon, afternoon, evening, and then weekend? Try and differentiate it that way on the same line?
And then
it will result in going to 2 lines, but because you either put a bracket on top of 1 through 5 and say weekdays, or you put weekday after each one of those.
Or say 1 weekday and then 1A morning, 1B noon, that sort of thing, and then 2 weekend? Make the differentiation that way? Is that getting too complicated?
Yeah.
How about if you add the word or? You have it just like it is with those
there you go.
boxes.
There you go.
You say
That'll help a
or
lot.
weekend.
Nice solution.
And so, because I guess morning weekends, night weekends
Hey.
isn't as important as
Good
weekends
catch.
versus the week. Okay, thanks.
I had a problem with number 3 for that. I came up with 2 answers rather than just one, because one was not complete. And so, like, just to give you an example, for my answers, I checked off 3 as to shop, but also I checked off number 8 and added to visit friends, because that's something else that we do,
But if you were to mark only one, could you pick one that was more?
because it's a
Could you
flip.
pick, could you pick? the
That was
last
my
one and
point,
say
that's why I put both down.
Shop and visit friends? Then we can.
Julio could, because we've talked about it, whether anybody else would figure that out or not, it's something else. How much more complicated does it make it, Bob, if we would allow them 2 choices?
Well, not much really, because then we would simply set up the computer for multiple choice.
Could you do that for only one?
Well, that was the only other
No,
question
if
I
there's only
thought.
one, we don't, it's done a different way.
Okay.
But that's a matter of the setup, but question by question. But well, what do you say? Because I wouldn't like somebody to pick about 4 of them. Would it suffice to say, please mark only 1 or 2?
You're the expert, I'm gonna let you deal with it.
No.
When I read it, you gave it to me, I put
I
down
know.
2.
Or you mark no more than 2?
1 or 2?
I struggled for the same reason.
Yep, I did too.
Yep.
I finally decided going to restaurants, bars was what we did most of the time. But by all means, we use light rail and we shop. Saturday afternoon, we came down here and shopped.
It's artificially limiting the parameters we're asking people to respond to.
Yeah.
So if we could at least go to 2, we'll get the preponderance.
Just add, just say, please mark only 1 or 2. Because they keep, filling out more boxes, we don't learn a whole lot.
Right. They're indecisive.
So let me go back.
I guess we could put in all of the above.
Just to make sure I've got number 4 correct. I've got it reading, number 1, weekday morning, 2 noon, 3 afternoon, 4 evening, 5 all day, or 6 weekend. Is that what everybody agreed to? So we start off with that weekday on the first one and just carry it through and then say or weekend, and that'll get the idea across the first 5.
Yeah.
It'll get the idea across to most.
That's clear.
Most people.
Other comments? We don't have a big crowd tonight, so I know we have a question from.
I do. Thank you for, obviously you guys have worked really hard on this, and I think it's a great survey. Having never seen it before, just a couple of questions or observations. And Dennis, I'm not sure if you're really looking for comments to change things or not, but the very first sentence, the Littleton Planning Commission, City Council, and City staff use the comp plan for long-range planning and zoning decisions. I think it's fair to assume that a large percentage of your population is going to know that means comprehensive plan, but there can be a large percentage of people that think it's a complimentary plan and it's free. And I would specifically label it as a comprehensive plan.
We originally said that, in
And
fact.
if you wanted to identify it in, in parentheses as a comp plan, that's okay. But I think it'd be fair to assume that a lot of people won't know what a comp plan is.
No, I agree with that, Dennis, because originally it said, use the comprehensive plan parens comp plan.
Right, let's go back to that. I think that's a good one, thanks.
And then the second sentence, and maybe I need to say it out loud, so if you'll indulge me in saying it out loud, but I think it reads strange.
Okay.
With your participation, the comp plan will be revised to reflect changes since it was adopted in 1981.
Comma.
Because we, at one point, had that have occurred since it was adopted. And I think we had a sense that it was kind of unnecessary verbiage, and we didn't need it. It was clear without it. But I'm with you. It doesn't sound.
It sounds to me like that it's being revised to reflect the changes that have already been adopted, not that you're soliciting input to make further revisions.
We're really talking about reflecting changes to the community, not to the comp plan.
And really, right, and you're talking about additional revisions, and that's what you're looking for, not just reflecting what changes have been made since it. I understand.
Can we delete to reflect changes since it was, so it would read with your participation, the comp plan will be revised since it was adopted in 1981 or something like that.
You didn't need to say it's going to be revised. Keep it simple.
Well,
There was a sense, I think, on the committee and with Kelly and Chris, that, with Bob, that we needed to have some sense of, why it's being revised, because it's an older plan. So they wanted to have the date in there if possible, but I'm open to it.
Will we revise for this first time? Form was revised for this?
no,
It's been
revised.
revised.
Yeah, it is a tough one. I know you guys are wordsmithing hard here.
Well, I mean, the charge to the commission from the city council basically was to re-examine comp plan and update it to reflect changes in the community. And I think that's really the sense that we're trying to convey to the public.
You
We're not
have,
looking for a sweeping new comp plan necessarily, but the purpose is to reflect changes in the community.
in the first survey you had referring to the comp plan, this is a dynamic tool that must be updated to reflect both tradition and changing times. Maybe we could leave out tradition. So we would say this is a dynamic tool that must be updated to reflect changing times since 1981.
Do we need 1981 in there?
Well, Dennis said they wanted to get the date in
I
there.
wanted to, but I'm happy moving it out too.
Okay.
I think,
Well, then,
I like Dave's,
just to-
I get to reflect changes in the community, understand what Norm's saying. The caveat of all this is that we want to keep the changes to this as few as possible if we can.
sure.
Just because Chris and Kelly are already under too much pressure, so.
Sure.
But I'll take that back and we'll
Well, you just add in the community after changes is,
Put a period.
would probably
Changes in
do
the
it.
community.
And drop the, since it was adopted in 1981?
Yeah.
Is everybody okay with that?
No, I
It
don't
doesn't
know
just-
about that because if it looks, really ancient, I think more people would see the point of it. I don't know.
Well, balancing that is the sense that, well, it's been sitting there collecting dust for 27 years, 28 years, when in fact it has been updated on occasion.
Even referred to.
Well, yeah, that's,
I'm not sure we need the date in there.
Okay. I'm going to consider dropping the date.
So is it kind of the consensus is to add updated to reflect changes in the community and that's it? Is that what people, or do we want to go back to?
I don't like that. I like that it's short.
I like that in short, and we want people to get through this as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And if you start adding more verbiage that goes on, they're going to give up after question 3.
Okay. Anybody have anything else to add or ask about any of the questions or the format? Does anybody see anything that we should have picked up that's really important enough to challenge people's time in finalizing this? I mean, generally, the idea was to stimulate discussion.
Right.
And have we done that with what we see on this survey?
I guess I'm unclear. Are we going to use the full-term comprehensive plan?
I think for the first.
For the first one and then comp plan.
After that comp plan is what we're doing.
I would tend to be a critic of the survey here, and in the sense that it may not be providing, if you get this, you're going to have some information, you can read through this and say, oh, the people who filled this out are predominantly females in an age range of certain out, who owned a home or rented a home, lived in the Northeast, and so what? And the real question is, does this give want more residential development down here, but some of the questions seem to be that they're not necessarily going to give you good information and maybe wouldn't go against what your design is anyway. If you ask, like in number 11, pedestrian-friendly improvements such as decorative lights, benches, trees, wide sidewalks, pedestrian crossing signals, and storefronts that come up to the sidewalk. It seems to me that that's already the policy of the city and what people do in all shopping areas anyway. So what is the decision, once you get the information to that, what's the decision that the planning commission makes? To encourage lights, to require lights, to bring them out to the storefronts, to the sidewalk, to make trees planted, or what? And that would be my criticism overall of the report. The standard when I was studying doing these kind of things was you don't ask questions that aren't going to give you valuable information. That it's just kind of, it's nice to do, but what information does it give you of value for the purposes of the planning commission or the comp plan?
Let me answer that. I think that what we tried to do or thought about is that because it's only, 22 questions in total, we're not expecting a lot, but we are expecting more of a teaser to get people interested to think about the downtown in whatever manner they want. And if you plug that into the open house situation where theoretically we're going to get more people that are going to be intrigued by what they have written and want to know more about it, will come to the open house and discuss more information where we can get additional information than what we already have, so that we can use this as either a qualifier or not when it comes to certain issues that may or may not be brought up. That's the way I look at it. It's not like, it's a type of survey that this is not going to be this is not a monumental survey where you can, I don't think the Planning Commission is going to rest all of its decision abilities based upon this survey. I think what it's really going to do is either going to confirm or deny certain things that we have been thinking that were important. And I think the survey only touches upon those things just to get people thinking.
Well, that being said, is gender piece of information is really going to tell us anything?
I think it will be useful. It's impossible to take into consideration everybody in the household, you see. I think you find it useful. That's basically all I could say about it. And in other words, the demographic breakouts, which start with 18, basically, tell you a lot about who it was that did all of this. And are they typical citizens? Probably not. Any self-selected sampling gives you approximations, but you don't hang a plus or minus 5 on it. So that to me just puts in a little different additional information to the demographics, which you may or may not care about, but sometimes it isn't. Let me put it this way: it's not going to harm the grand totals, whatever. But I just think it might be of some interest to see who takes the time to do this. Is it heavily weighted, for example, number 21? How does that compare to the census breakouts for the city of Littleton? So, it might come close, it might not.
Comments on that subject?
First question, how do we mail it? Do we just put a piece of paper on it and
going to come with a little piece of glue that actually is there when it goes out. It's light enough you can actually undo it and then put it back and it will stick. You go back.
Who has to put the little gobs of glue on it?
The printer does that.
Okay, back to the question about gender. Any other comments on that?
I can see where demographics, that seems sort of standard, and unfortunately it is a brief survey, so this takes up a good piece of it. But if people 65 or over are saying, yes, I would live in downtown Littleton, or no, I never would, I think that might be an important piece of information. Now, it may come down in the middle where the same percentage of over 65 as, say, 25 to 34 either would or wouldn't ever live in downtown Littleton. But if it breaks out that one says yes and one says no, some particular group says yes or no, then we can go back and look at what do they want more of. For instance, more housing. Okay, who is it that's saying they want more housing? Over 65, that's probably a different kind of housing in the lower age demographic. So I guess you can try to draw correlations back and forth, and perhaps it's possible to make too much out of them. My other consideration is, are we going to then use something very close, use this as a template for some other areas? Say, if we're talking to residents in the vicinity of South Broadway, where the city hasn't pursued a program of standardizing sidewalks and so on. We've done that up and down Littleton Boulevard with lighting and separating the sidewalk from the street. So are some of these going to be more valuable in other areas than they are, particularly here, where, as Dave says, that is pretty well already a policy of the city in this area?
I would think they vary a little bit, just my initial thought, just because I think when we go to South Broadway or someplace else, I think if we do surveys, it's going to be primarily the people who are there, businesses, property owners, and residents in that area, because they don't have the same sense of ownership citywide that downtown. So I think redirect it a little bit. I think some of them particularly are going to be applicable there. Others may not be, but I think it's a start. We can adjust it according to what the specific issues are there, I think.
I guess I'm having a hard time figuring, I mean, I can see the applicability as far as categorizing or breaking it down by age, activities, like what housing they'd be interested in, whether they own or rent is going to tell us something, area they're coming from, how long they live in the city, I can understand that. I haven't figured out what gender is going to contribute to the evaluation of their responses. On the other hand, the one thing I think is singularly conspicuous by its absence here is any indication as to whether they are a business owner or operator in the downtown area. And I thought we had talked about that as being fairly significant.
We have under 19, own a business Littleton, but move somewhere else. Let's see. I thought we had it in here.
I thought we were going to add it under 20. Own a home, rent a home, own a business, lease a space.
When it gets back to Bob's, somebody may be doing two, you've got to sort for two different.
Which is possible. They could own a home and own a business, or own a home and lease space, business space.
Just from previous discussions, it sounded like making that distinction, requiring that piece of information to sort their responses would be more useful to us than gender responses.
I've come to the conclusion, I go the opposite way. I think that anytime you have a gender response, one, it tells me who in the household is really the most interested one, if they're going to do it or not, and who this also attracts. And I think that's really important. I think that if we find out that, hypothetically, if we get 80% of the things back and they're all women, that tells me a lot, whereas only you got 20% guys doing it. That's telling me a whole bunch of where a lot of attitude is coming and where support for the downtown is coming from. which also means that we have a gap that we have to deal with as well.
One of the things that surprised me in going to the HULA meetings, the Downtown Merchants Association meetings, is how much of their marketing is directed towards women, because they see that as such a huge percentage of their business. They have women's night only,
Yep.
Retail night. They really do an awful lot of marketing for women specifically, because so many of their businesses are more oriented toward women than they are to men. Whereas, perhaps we've got the men's clothing store, we have restaurants, bars, maybe more across the board. I think a lot of their marketing certainly is.
Okay, well, I'll start off my comment with, I didn't see how that would be applicable. Leo's just told me how that would be applicable. That solved that very nicely. So let me go back to the second part of it. Are we identifying or allowing for a spot on owning a business or a downtown property as and where we should? We've got it under 19. What if you own a business in Littleton and you live in Littleton? You can't answer the question. Is there another way of introducing that factor into here without that conflict?
Well, if you could answer more than one, I think. Do own a home, rent a home, own a business downtown, own a property downtown.
In 19 number 8, basically doesn't do anything, because the only circumstance in which people are asked to fill this out is if they live here or if they own a business and live somewhere else. But then you say, I don't live in the city, who would those people be?
The people who own the business or own property downtown.
Or picked it up at the museum.
Picked it up at the library.
I mean, one of the things we've been talking about is the idea of addressing the tourism issue, whether you call it formal tourism or just regional visitors. So I think that's we're still going to get a certain number of responses that way.
From tourists?
Tourists are people who live in Inglewood and come into Littleton all the time, who live in Highlands Ranch. Students from ACC.
Well, the people in Highlands Ranch, unless they pick up a questionnaire somewhere, aren't going to get it.
But we are making the questionnaires available at places like the museum, the library. There are people who will be coming in.
Yeah.
We would have room.
Well, my experience, and it's been in such things as school district accountability committees, is that relatively few people actually do pick them up, but it's considered, a symbol of openness, basically. I don't know.
I think if we don't have that item 8 on there, people are going to start to write it in on the side,
Bob,
whether we ask for it or not.
on number 20, could we have, a response where we say, answer all that apply? Would that be too?
What's that?
If we said answer all that apply and we added, own a business, own a property, would that be manageable? Along with if they,
Well, yeah.
if they own a home plus they own a business plus they own property, they end up with 3.
It just throws it into, again, a multiple choice.
Own a business downtown.
Right. Yeah, own a business downtown and property downtown.
I think having those 2 options down to 20 would do us more good than having it mixed in with 7 where somebody's going to ask, well, what happens when I own a business and live in Littleton?
Right. Okay. Other comments?
Well, yeah, excuse me. There are going to be more of those people, I think, than just flat out don't live in the city and don't own a business here, which is what number 8 implies, I guess. There'd be more of those.
So just to clarify, we want to add to question 20, answer all that applies, and then we'll add number 3, own a business.
Downtown.
Own a downtown business, or,
Own property downtown.
and then number 4, own property downtown.
The thing is, though, the question says, please indicate which one of the following best describes where you live.
Oh, we do this on 20.
Oh, okay.
On
All
20.
right.
Answer all that apply.
I guess I was backed up, but if we say where you live and then.
Yeah, this would be, do you own a home, rent a home, and you could.
Yeah.
And possibly you could do 3 or 4 of those.
Okay, I'm going to ask this
Oh,
question.
my home, rent my home, maybe we should say.
I'm going to ask this question all over again here. At our last meeting, we were all liking the idea of having number 16 up there with number 15, and through all of our committee meetings, Bob, Dennis, myself, Linda, and Kelly all agreed on having 16 up there next to 15. Why is 16 not up there next to 15, even though everybody doing the survey is wanting it up there?
In defense of Chris, I think what Chris was thinking was that we were doing that in order to save space, because he kept hearing we wanted to save space and have a larger font and more white space. We ended up with a wider margin and we wanted a larger font. And I think he thought because he was able to get the font that he was looking for, which is a 9.5, is what they use in the report, and still have those separate, that was preferable in terms of cleanliness. It was just a cleaner response. So he thought we didn't need it. He thought we were doing it for that specific reason. If we're doing it for another reason, I'm sure we can explain that to him. But that's, I think, what he was anticipating that the real advantage of that was. That's how we started the conversation, trying to save space.
So Steve, you were talking about merging?
Merging 15.
Well, no, number 16 was going to be off to the side, like we had here in the original.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think Chris was just trying to be consistent or something. I don't know why. I think he was asked to basically put it on one line 3 or 4 times, and.
So we still want to try that? I mean,
But he's got the computer. I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, and it was unanimous at our last meeting that we liked it up there, and it was unanimous through our committee meetings.
And it gives us more white space at the bottom.
Right, in the,
Instead of the littles
for the glue.
and for the
Blue, sure.
You know, it causes a very slight hiccup for the data entry person, but you know, they got to do a slight shift when they get to that line. But,
So we've been very, very specific, though, every time we've
I know.
turned it back to them.
But I think that's why he wouldn't do it, because he thought it was our intent.
No,
So
I was
he's trying to
fully,
save space other places.
I was fully with
Like
that.
hiking it up other places. So, do people want that? I mean, do you think that's cleaner? Do you think it reads better? Do you think it's a better questionnaire? And how much trouble is it for you, Bob, if we do that? For the people who have to go through and actually.
Are you still talking about 15 and 16?
Yeah. Is that problematic? How
Well, it
problematic?
isn't cleaner, but it's harmless. Let me put it that way.
To what, to have them on the same line?
To have them the same way. As long as there's
Space.
as long as there's plenty of separation.
The glue needs to take care of the outside and the inside.
Good. Be right there. Sure.
It makes it read a little better. I mean, right now it says, do you feel that downtown Wilmington is friendly to bicyclists? And the next one just says.
To pedestrians.
Whereas I think that the genesis of that is they were side by side.
We're side by side.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. The original draft, which I did have something to do with, repeated that. Do you feel that downtown Littleton is friendly to bicyclists also? But however that got changed, it isn't confusing the way it was changed to.
Okay. So if we say 60, so we'll have 15 on the left, 16 on the right.
Yeah, but I'd put 16 about in the middle so that people don't lose it.
Okay.
Anything else? Have we already made so much work for the revision for tomorrow morning?
Oh, this is the least we've had.
Careful,
Right.
Brian, you're going to invite more.
No, on all of the editing sessions, there'd be stuff scrawled all over.
Since we made modifications to number 20, do we really need question 7 and number 19?
I think that's the gist of what we said. We put the options down for property ownership or business ownership under 20. We don't need 7.
Okay, so delete 7.
Because it should be.
Okay. And then, did we want, like at the bottom of this, a place for comments?
No,
Okay.
that
The
was.
comments will get it.
Okay.
After people have seen this and say, well, wait a minute, you didn't ask me about X, Y, and Z.
And they got their shot at comments on number 1 and 2, but no, I think Kelly well remembers when we had a senior citizen survey, and we had a place at the bottom, and people were promised, you know, that they'd get a call back on it if they entered their phone number. She ended up having to do all of them. We sort of thought there'd be a division of labor, and in fact, that's not what happened.
I appreciate the fact that this time there is a city of Littleton, if you will, disclaimer on this thing, like other than the draft before, but I was still hoping that we'd have either a website or a telephone number that they could refer to, because they don't have any other information on here as a telltale of who to call or whatever.
Do that.
That's a good place.
That's something we did talk about at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Is that going to be the planning director's home phone number?
Sure.
Cell phone.
Cell phone, okay. Good. Cool. Again.
Sorry, one more comment over.
I was wondering about a point of clarification on this, on question 11, back there. One of the reasons I asked about this is that when the design guide standards and guidelines were put in place for downtown Littleton, the issue came up and was raised by me basically about storefronts that came up to the sidewalk. And I was trying to retain, not insist that it be done when there's development in downtown Littleton, especially on the western and eastern end of the strip, because historically it had not been that way, and I wanted to kind of retain the ability for stores to be set back and away. But the latest trendy kind of idea that goes around is that basically that all of these things have to be brought out to the streetscape. And so if say you get 60% of the people who vote that it's a 4 or 5 for them, that this is important. There's so many factors in this. Which are they voting for? Lights, or benches, or trees, or wide sidewalks, or pedestrian crossing signals, or storefronts that come up to the sidewalk? Or will this be used to represent that, 60% of the people are making the statement that it's very important that storefronts come up to the sidewalk?
When in point of fact, we've discussed just the opposite on occasion, as you said. So I guess the question to the commissioners is that element, and the rest of them are relatively consistent. They are pedestrian friendly. He does talk about improvements, so the assumption is that they'd like to see more of it. But does the storefronts that come up the sidewalk really belong in that group?
I would take it out. I think that's right. In the hearing for Merle's, that was one of the things that one of the architects, I believe, said he disagreed with the design standards, that a setback, that change, a change in setback, I should say, I guess, was a breath of fresh air, if I remember correctly, as you came down the street, and he was not in favor of Merle's having to be pulled to the front. Merle's is a little less intrusive, particularly as warm weather comes along. The doors will be open, and it's not like a solid wall right at the edge of the sidewalk.
And we had talked about that before, about the idea of trying to enhance or encourage sidewalk activity in association with storefronts. So whether the storefronts are straight down or we've got some ins and outs. Is that the consensus of the?
To leave the last one off, is that one of your questions?
Yeah, there's another point too, and that is, what about storefronts that come up to the sidewalk are pedestrian friendly?
All I could think of is the theory is that the pedestrian can look in the window without detouring at
That's
all.
an interest, I think,
But I
for
don't
a
know
lot.
that that's any friendlier than being able to congregate, a larger group in front of a store where they're all demanding.
No,
space
to
or
be-
something.
And at the open house, we may yet get somebody who wants to talk about the extremes of all the storefronts lining up, or some of the storefronts being 30, 40, 50 feet back from the street, and what that does to break up the rhythm of urban environment.
Yeah.
Let's drop that one.
Okay.
If this were,
Well,
if this were a telephone survey, every one of those would be a separate question, I assure you. But here, space constraints caused it, I think, but I do think taking that off is a plus.
And I think it depends on Charlie Blossom, he'd sit there and say, well, we're doing most of this stuff. And yes, Charlie, you are. Thank you very much.
thanks for channeling Charlie.
Anybody else?
sign off as it is with changes? Okay. We'll get those made and stay on schedule. Great. And thank you to Linda and to Steve and Bob. Great assistance. Really appreciate it. So.
We didn't take up the entire hour reading all of it, so.
No.
You want to let these back, or we keep these for reference?
You may keep it. Anybody has a clean one, I'll take that.
And don't forget to add the website in our phone numbers.
I'll do the website because I think it's got better. Outreach action agenda, targeted surveys. One thing we've been talking about doing is doing more targeted surveys where we get additional information. We use this as the survey where we open up an opportunity for property owners, business owners, key stakeholders downtown, residents downtown, to give us additional information for that key group. Talk about going out and having plan commissions actually doing some of that discussion with people. We are scheduled for the Hoodlum meeting on April 1st, 8 a.m. in the morning. And that's a great opportunity, I think, to at least introduce that, or we could, because we need to have these interviews completed at the same time as the surveys are completed, we need to have all that done by the 14th. We could actually start before then and just reiterate on the 1st that meeting is what we're doing and actually have it listed. I'm wondering if we should put together another subcommittee that would help figure out who we're going to go to and who's going to go talk to whom and all those things as well. I'd be happy to do that too, but if you want to have something to do that, that's always helpful as well.
What's the time for that meeting?
April, it starts at 8 a.m., goes to about 9:30.
Right.
We have a subcommittee that was working on the list of.
That's right, so just use that, yeah, okay.
So we use that document then to kind of.
To start, yeah, and then
To
we
start
need to get
slide.
specific names, specific contact information, we need addresses and phone numbers, and we need, to be able to go out and talk to each of those people individually, so we need to go to a lot of detail from that list.
My recollection is it was a very long list, so we may have to focus.
Well, again, I think that list was maybe different than the stakeholder group we're talking about now. My understanding from the stakeholder group is really the key stakeholders downtown, which is property owners, business owners, maybe one representative from the county, one from EchoStar, one from people like that as well, one from ACC, but it's more individuals is my thought. So rather than that full list, for this portion of it at least, they will look at that. Am I on the right track on that?
Are we asking too much of a two-person subcommittee?
Well, I think they'd have to ask for assistance for actually
We
going
will
through
have
it.
to break it up.
Yeah.
We have listed, the downtown merchants was one, downtown property owners, ACC, for instance, we need to talk to them, someone there. I don't know, Friends of the Library Museum, can we talk to them in relation to downtown? That seems a little more remote.
It does seem more remote to me too, and I'm thinking for this, it's really, Hoodlum is a great group for individuals, but we want to talk to the individual, and not all property owners and business owners or are members of Hoodlum. So we need to go beyond that. We need to get the developers, the architects, other folks that are down there as well. So, and then beyond that, people that live downtown. We need to talk to people in R5. We need to talk to people, just who aren't involved in our regulations too. Kind of get that sense. It's not that we have to cover 100%, but I think we need to be represented. So at least get as much input from a fairly representative group as we can.
So are we asking the subcommittee to refine the list, work with staff to target and who to talk to, that sort of thing, and then start looking at assignments for the individual commissions to go out?
And they,
Is that something we can do for the next meeting?
I would like to if we could, for the 23rd.
Could I take maybe less than 5 minutes, go through the list that we've got, Linda got this put together, and get a thumbs up or thumbs down from these groups, and then that'll cut it immediately with the consensus of the board. If I'm good with it, we get a, well, maybe yes, maybe no.
Well, let's ask this first. How much time are we going to have to use? How many weeks are we going to have to be able to I'm serious. You know, a list this long, when you've got 3 or 4 months, is one thing. It's something else when you only have 3 or 4 weeks.
If we don't start to April 1st, we have 2 weeks. So.
Well, that's gonna be short list.
Right. If we start before that, maybe 3 weeks, we need to wait until the surveys are printed. You can print them off here. Question, I don't think they have to wait until the report comes out. They probably could do it independently.
So is the idea that we'd actually take the surveys out and then go approach these businesses and fill out the surveys, or how?
Well,
do
Bob
those
has done this, and I think there are a couple ways to do it. One is to take it out to them individually, and then come back and pick it up later, and then have that discussion with them later. Bob, what's your thought? I know you've got some reservations and some conditions on how this works and doesn't work.
That's how it started out. The theory would be that the commissioners would ask for amplifications beyond the questionnaire from the business people.
The questionnaire is the intro, the starting point, but then what we're really doing is doing short, concise interviews.
That's what
casually.
That's what the discussion
One
was.
open question in terms of what you see as the key issues. Probably what we really want. That may be different than what we're getting otherwise.
Okay, going back, sorry.
Oh,
I was just trying to lay out some parameters.
That's fine.
The goal is to open that communication with them, get them engaged in the process, as well as get information from them. But I think it's get them aware and have them tie into keeping track of what we're doing. So, excuse me.
Personally, I can see a big time constraint, even just going to all the major businesses. So would this be workable? That we take this, which has a no postage required, drop it off, and include a note that says something along the line of, if you would like to discuss this with the planning commission, we will try to arrange a meeting with you and pick this up. Otherwise, just please fill it out and return it. Because if you're going to go to Regal Plastics and Echo Star, it seems to me that it will take a phone call and then a return phone call and another phone call to try to find out who you should talk to.
Right.
And to get an appointment and then drop it off. Maybe if you can leave it at a desk with a receptionist and say, could you route this to someone who would be concerned about what's going on in the community with planning, and then they can call back and contact somebody, call the city, and then you could perhaps assign any of the planning commissioners, try to find someone that has time to talk to them.
So we're inviting the one-on-one contact from those who are really interested, rather than importuning them for 15 or 20 minutes at a time across the board.
And just, putting this into their hands as best you can without trying to set an appointment to meet somebody.
Just kind of self-selected.
At 10:30 on Thursday.
Provide more information about the self-selected, would that work in terms of?
As a double self-selected, sure, you bet.
I hope that might be workable because, we've got quite a few different entities to contact. We've identified quite a few. Downtown is probably one of the ones that will be the most labor intensive. There's a lot of good-sized businesses. John Ostermiller was clear at our workshop that go out and talk to them. We give them the opportunity. If sometimes the person involved or the person that should be involved is simply out of town traveling. Look at Pablos, who is frequently gone.
So if they have the surveys in hand and by around the 1st, it's going to take them a few days to look at it, or get it, look at it, go through and decide, an opportunity to talk to someone at the planning commission would be a good idea. It's going to be the end of that week before we really start getting any calls in, presumably to you, Dennis, to start scheduling. So we're down to between about, what's that going to make it, about the 6th or 7th, and the 27th, we have our study session. So 3 weeks maybe, which means a lot of us are going to have to be trying to be flexible.
Well, if Bob really needs it in by the 14th, so we can do the analysis on it. So we need to.
Well, surveys, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about some of the interview responses that go beyond the survey.
I'm not sure that, since basically it almost, these, discussions with business people almost, is a separate, subject, and I don't believe that, it's necessary to tabulate them altogether.
We're essentially doing, one or two person subcommittee reports on these
Yeah.
outreach.
I would think, look, one of the sets of priorities for who's most important when we get in touch with a secondary or tertiary professionals to go through it. So we really need to focus on, put our effort into these and try and get these two to get done.
Yeah, my concern with having some way to identify the ones that weren't distributed by the Littleton report was because we will almost certainly add a question indicating questionnaires that came in separate and apart from all the rest of them. But that has nothing to do really, I think, with the, you might call them the amplification meetings.
So we can do that separately, and it can go a little bit longer than when you need the feedback.
Yeah, I would think so.
So we're back to about 2 to 3 weeks. So are we going to draft a separate letter that goes out to those businesses with the survey inviting specifically an opportunity for a one-on-one?
Could we amend this portion of it for a certain number of them? Tell us what you think. We would be happy to meet with you. A member of the planning commission can be made available by calling.
Or I think, for something like that, we need a specific contact name. We work with BAC to get contact names. So we've got somebody specific that we're targeting. And I do think a letter that goes out signed, by me or, by Dave or somebody, I think. So it looks pretty official. And then a follow-up contact and a phone call that everyone can make.
Bob, logistically, is there a big difference between a separate letter with a standard survey versus a separately directed or addressed survey? Logistically, doesn't matter much.
No, as long as they all come in, as timely as the ones that are out in the houses. In other words, I just have a feeling though that if you start doing one-on-ones, that it's just not going to fit into the schedule. However, the purpose is quite different anyway.
I think if you send that letter out and ask them, or tell them that we would meet with them, we need to set a time frame. We are setting aside this April, or March 22nd to April 4th time frame, and beyond that.
For that matter, does that specific letter necessarily have to go out physically with the survey? Can we not send out the letter in advance and say, you're shortly going to receive a survey, et cetera, we'd like to give you an opportunity to invite contact. If you can call such and such, call Dennis Swain, and set up an appointment between this date and that date. That's giving directed attention to a specific contact, a specific organization, rather than just something that's tagged on here that they may or may not notice.
I would think that you would still want to enclose a copy of the questionnaire because the two might not get together. In other words, they might have filled it out and sent it in, or they might have thrown it in the wastebasket.
And a circular file.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
So send it out with a letter and they have it done.
Yeah.
So a good way of guaranteeing.
Redundantly.
And maybe shorten that gap between receipt on the first and the time we get a phone call, which gives us more opportunity to respond.
But just make them a different color paper, or as I told Dennis, it could even just be a check mark. It's added after the fact by somebody, not me.
So if everybody's in agreement, that's a good approach to take. Norm, you still know? We just take the list we have then, we don't need to scale it down until we
get an onslaught of 50 different companies who want to meet with us one-on-one? Or do we have a true list of addresses and names?
We don't have the addresses and names yet.
For purposes of the downtown, are we going to approach the Center for the Blind? Are they close enough or too far out? Are we going to talk to the seminary? Are they close enough or too far out? We'll go to ACC. Are there other schools? We just have schools listed. That's why I sort of wanted to go one by one, get just a thumbs up or a thumbs down. School for the Blind. Are we talking to them now? Or are we talking to them in a neighborhood meeting in the Stern Park area? That's what I was going to solicit, is running through the list as quickly as possible.
I think we should do that and then list it out on the board so that we know what we're dealing with.
If our subcommittee is going to try to refine the list, I'd like some initial direction from the rest of the commission, I guess is what I'm asking.
So could we do it as a first cut kind of thing? Anybody in the organization that is within the perimeter of downtown, obviously, they're on the list. Anybody whose activities like the Center for the Blind constantly coming in and out of downtown, that's fairly obvious. When you start talking about Denver Seminary and moving south or moving north, at some point you start to trail off on, maybe not on applicability, because their people do come back, but given the time frame, we may be spreading ourselves too thin if we go too far through.
I think that what's in the red, let's figure out how many folks there are in there first before we start going with a lot of folks outside, because I don't know how many that is, but I'm just saying, yeah, it's a lot. So, that might, if you do that first, you'll be doing good in a couple of weeks.
Or even staying inside the blue, you still got a large group.
You got a bigger group.
So much bigger.
You got a bigger group.
Just right off the top, inside the red excludes Regal Plastics and Echo Star both.
That's true.
Yeah.
And my comment to that is, we're making a conscious decision. I guess the conscious decision that we're making is we're looking for that area which is in the red, and we're saying the historic main street as being the primary, and then the secondary would be the downtown Littleton, which is the blue area.
Of course, we also leave out county building, ACC, the city building for that.
I understand all of that as well. Well, no, not really. It is within the purview of the downtown study area. The blue. But, if you come up with, if you do everybody that's in the blue area, you come up with 500 people, you're not going to do it with, or 500 different groups. You're not going to do it in 2 weeks. That's why I'm saying, you start with the red, see what you get, and then or come up with a number, and if it's over 100, we got enough problems right there.
Could we ask Norman Lynn to review the list and start with the group, people inside the red area, and then think of significant, I'm sure there's a more politic word than that. Key, that's the loaded word too. Think of those groups outside of the red area, but within the blue area that really are going to have a significant.
The problem is, and I think one of the things that we need to face as a planning commission is because of the fact we are a small number. Our intentions are very good, but the bottom line is physically we have a time constraint that is going to be unbelievable.
Trying to take on
Plus,
living the effort.
That's right. And I think that that's something we also need to reckon with in the course of our decision making.
So I think that's why we try and do some kind of sampling.
That's about what we're looking at.
That's what we'd be doing.
Just like this survey, it's a sampling.
Sampling, self-selected.
So if we could ask Norman Lynn to get the list together, working with staff on the inside the red area, look for key players, large key players outside that area, intimately involved with downtown. And that's as much as we can do for now until the openings and the surveys. Consensus, everybody sounds agreeable on that?
Because if there is an opportunity, say we get an overwhelming support, and all of a sudden that open house we have 400 people show up, then obviously that's going to tell us that we got to do some more work. If nobody shows up, that's a different story as well. I mean, the open house is going to be a very telltale sign
Well,
of
the other thing is,
what the involvement level really is.
if we do get more people responding to this request for a one-on-one, then we can handle it. We may be reduced at the end to say, we're just not gonna have enough time. We really would like to see you at the open house to get your input, to engage in dialogue, and that's the best we're gonna do.
Well, and to the point there, at least we can say we'll have easels ready and stuff so that they can write down their comments or their interest on a given subject. So we'll document it so it doesn't just go to the wayside of unfulfilled intents.
The idea is to do a sampling and a survey, not write a doomsday book on everybody and everything. Okay?
It'd be nice to get a sampling of the residents down there too, in the R5 areas also. That'd be,
Because that's a big issue we need to really address.
We'll see that in the survey.
You know, that's mailed to them. I guess what I'm thinking is, for our purposes, we would be remiss to say, include Kate's Wine Bar, nothing personal for one of my neighbors that's involved, at the expense of including, where we excluded ACC, the Denver Seminary, or Regal Plastics, larger properties, larger employers. I think that was John Ostermiller's point, unless I misunderstood, is you better reach out to those people because, frankly, someone with 75 or 100 employees may not come to a public meeting and stand there and wait, 2 hours to raise his hand and say, I'd like to comment on this. Their time is quite valuable, and they probably travel. So if we can engage them somehow, part of it is giving them the opportunity.
Well, then maybe that's part of the homework assignment that the group's got to figure out, is find out who in this key organization are the go-to people, rather than wait and say,
And that's where,
dropping it off at the front desk and say, this has to go to somebody so they can do it. That's not going to happen.
Linda and I will work on a list, and then maybe Chris Gibbons can help us know who to contact, and if we're at a loss, then we'll show up at the front desk.
Two other things we need to keep in mind with this outreach for the bigger organizations, even around this core area. Number one, highlighting to them that this is coming up, and that the survey out there that we're inviting them to comment may prompt them to encourage their employees and staff to make sure they return surveys. So we could get a stimulated response from that. And the second thing is, we put the survey together to try and ask questions in the areas we think are important. This one-on-one business may get feedback that we didn't anticipate, and interest from organizations that we hadn't thought would have been all that involved, which is why that's going to do something a little bit more than just the outright survey.
Oh, that will certainly happen.
And I think as much as anything, it's a venue for us to get out and talk to these people, get some interaction with them.
So is that something you can do? What do we need to that short list in the next week or so?
That's
So
right.
our staff
Yeah,
can
if
have
I
contact.
can do that, that'd be great. I can get together with Chris and Joanne, who would actually have that, probably it's Joanne.
Would it be okay, wouldn't you finish that list and share it with the rest of the commissioners in case somebody comes up with something that double check perhaps?
Cool. Next, open house. We're scheduled for May 11th, 7 to 9 at the Inn at Gardens. So it's a great location, I think. It's got good parking. We looked at the location. We looked at Buck's Head. Buck's Head was actually scheduled that night. We looked at ACC. AC had some nice facilities, but parking's always an issue. And it's just complex in terms of how you find the room. They've got pretty good accessibility, but again, you have to find the right board to be accessible. And they were very welcoming. It seems to be as logical as going to Gardens. So that's was very accommodating. And the room holds about 250 of the chairs and tables. And I wanted to check with you in terms of what we're thinking. Typically, what we see in an open house is, first half half an hour, 45 minutes, people are mulling around, you've got stations set up with individual planning commission members there to answer questions, take their comments, you have boards in each one, where you can write down, take additional information, and then you may have a presentation for half an hour or so. In the middle of that open house, we actually go through and say, here's what we're doing, here's the process, here's what we heard from the survey, Bob's information we make available at that point, and here's what we heard back from you. And then we open it up again for another half an hour or so of mulling around. Does that sound like reasonable? Yeah.
If you're gonna start at 7 and end at 9, I highly recommend that we have a brief presentation at 7:15.
Okay.
And depending upon what the flow is like, you have another presentation an hour later.
Okay, great.
And then in between there, you use that time for questioning. And I recommend that we get at least, I was thinking of the Post-its type of the big ones. That either you can put on a table or on an easel.
Right.
But you probably need at least, I'm going to say at least 12 to 15 easels. And
how many stations?
well, that's exactly, well, we know we'll need at least, we'll be at what, 7 of us for sure. And so that's 7 stations right there, because we might have to do it.
Plus me, you can count Suzanne.
Well, but that's,
get more staff.
well, that's something you need to kind of figure out. But I guess my comment is that, we're going to be there to answer and discuss questions or whatever, either specific or general. So I'm not so sure, I don't know if we want to have specific stations or whatever, because then if you have specific stations, a lot of times only people will go into one station or 2 stations, and then that person is mobbed while the other guys are just sitting there, doing nothing. So I guess my comment is if we kind of strategically located it all near a number of easels or whatever, and people can just walk up to us and we'll have our either name tags or something that represent us as being with the plan, and so that.
Then we'll actually have 2 more planning commissioners.
Well, there you go.
They'll be brand new.
Well, the other thing is you might also, for a lot of folks that don't have them, you might want to think about getting the name tags that we used to have in the past. I don't know if you remember what those are, Dennis. I know I still have mine that says I'm a Littleton Planning Commission member. And that way people will know who they're talking to.
As far as format, if we have these multiple stations, each of us inviting dialogue, are we going to be trying to take notes, or are we going to be able to double up and have somebody summarize his group?
What I would probably end up doing is I'd have an easel next to me if we're talking about it or whatever. I'd either have them first write it down and then we could discuss it with them. I'd like to get it in their own words rather than us trying to paraphrase what somebody else's comment is, because that in and of itself creates conflict sometimes. And I'm trying to minimize conflicts. I'd rather they wrote it down and I try to interpret it later.
We have a map of the study area, so we people have.
I think you have to have a couple of maps, at least 2 or 3 maps of the study area. I mean, everything needs to be kind of duplicated in that regard.
Yeah, I think one in each station plus.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because you need to duplicate, so if they go to, whoever they go through to, they're going to get basically the same information. We're just spreading it out in case there's 250 people.
Right,
I thought, made progress when we were marking hotspots and things like that. Can we do something to give them or make available on a table push pins, dots of different colors, and let them go to whatever map and indicate whatever we can think of. Problems with downtown parking, problems with traffic, perhaps traffic flow, maybe buildings that they really like and buildings that they really don't like. All that just to solicit information, get people to go around to map after map, perhaps, like you say, circulate a little so they don't all just go to one location and end up there for 20 minutes.
If you get 250 people, or if you get 100 people, not gonna be able to circulate around very much. They're not gonna be able to go from station to station.
If you get 150 in there,
How many were at the historical?
We had
90 and 50, I think.
Yeah.
You couldn't get up and move around in
No, you really
that
couldn't.
space.
Yeah.
this is actually a bigger room.
This is a bigger room.
Bigger room, but it's still, it's cumbersome, and you don't want, and then you gotta get people compact down to go through the next person.
Plus, I think, yeah, there are tables we'll have will be at the stations. I think those will be just in chairs.
What about like stations that have specific subject areas, like here's our parking station, here's our traffic station, here's our design, design station, I mean, and try to follow the subject
I
matter.
think if we had more time and work really well, the trouble is in such a short period of time, it's tough for people to get every place they want to be or they select one.
Well, that would be
There's
okay.
an advantage
you
to
know,
having limits through two, I mean, you know, issues now.
On the other hand, the people who are primarily interested in 3 or 4 subjects are sitting there being bored by the discussion on the other subjects at that table. We have, what, 8 weeks between now and the open house, so effectively 6 weeks to work out details.
Start thinking about it.
But we are going to have to start working.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah. It is.
And I thought that we were going to use part of the annual work session on Saturday, May 2nd, to talk about that and then flesh out the details and find out, you know, figure out what our handout's going to be, what kind of materials.
It's almost too late, though.
I was going to say, we should be, we could finalize it, that would make sense. But we need to be putting a lot of elbow grease into this over the next couple of meetings.
I recommend a subcommittee of people that doesn't exclude Linda or me because we have our assignments. I thought that worked well in the past to have subcommittees. Maybe a subcommittee can help Dennis come up with a design for this open house and also bring back a recommendation to the rest of the commission as to whether we're going to have peanuts and throw them all on the floor.
Oh, that's nostalgia. I'd love to do that. We've got really nice floors in there.
It's a historic aspect of it.
That'd be a nice touch.
I was just kidding.
Norm, with you, Julio, be willing to do that?
As long as I can do it before, I won't be around on May the 2nd.
Who's it? Who's doing it? Yours up? Curtin and it's Steve.
Well, we've got a 3-person subcommittee, but only 2 of them can meet at a time, so it's okay.
Well, you can still input.
Well, you're just not going to be there on the second, right?
That's right.
Yeah, he's not going to be at the open house because he's here before that. So
I'll be here at the open house, I just won't be here on the retreat day.
gotcha.
For the retreat, I won't be here.
We should all be done by then. So, Steve, is that okay with us?
And let me mention, one of the ideas that have come up in previous meetings is giving people maps and having them actually mark down what they think the central area should be. So we can collect that on the way out. And another suggestion I heard is to do something a little bit more interactive, almost game type situation for those meetings.
I will confess that Historic Preservation Board's Drew Grant set a high bar for us. So, for those of you who were there, you know that.
Are we going to have a banner? Were you going to have a banner made up to?
For the surveys.
Maybe not the slogan I previously suggested.
No.
Go across Main Street. Yeah, let me get one of them. That's a good idea. I would think we do it for the survey. We have the answer to the survey, that's on survey. So.
Oh, get it.
And then once they do the survey, they'll turn the open house, and the open house also will be an article and goes report. And it doesn't go.
I'd encourage each of us to brainstorm a little of this over the next 2 weeks, before the next meeting. Come back and maybe add to what the subcommittee starts to develop as well. Get some ideas out on the table so we can be prepared by the session. Next.
Next is upcoming meetings.
Before we move to upcoming meetings, how are you going to add some numbers on the
I think, you look like you're ready to depart.
About to escape. I have to talk to you, Dennis, about question 20
Okay, good.
tomorrow.
Okay, good. I'll call you.
I'll call you.
Okay, great. Okay, super.
Thanks,
Bob.
Bob.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Have a nice night. Okay, so I take it that so far we have no other applications coming up? Nothing on the table right now?
Nothing scheduled right now. So for the 23rd, we're looking at talking more about the outreach program, having a presentation on the downtown design guidelines, which we have Dick Farley's written the design guidelines, go through that for us, go through the process, go through the intent statement, what they're trying to achieve, what the sub areas are, why they came up with the sub areas, those are going to be critical for us, I think. And then actually work his way through the presentation. He has a PowerPoint that's pretty effective he can do for us, which will help. And actually go through the design guides so it's really with that as soon as possible.
So we're going to have the planning academy, the outreach update, and downtown design guidelines discussion.
Right. Anything else we need to add to that?
Can the PowerPoint then go out to the people watching? Or are we watching here and they're watching us watch? Which doesn't
No, good question. Let me ask. Yeah.
Seems like probably our discussion about the survey didn't give anyone anything to look at.
Right.
Which, well, it's not out there yet. We're trying to edit it. I don't know how we could have done it differently.
That sounds like a pretty full agenda.
I do. And I want to talk a little, I don't have anything on the schedule for the 13th yet, April 13th. We'll kind of decide that next week, and see where we are.
One of the things I'd like to suggest is we've talked about doing some kind of a case study, hypothetical or historical.
Good.
And we've had a lot of time so far. It hasn't been critical because we haven't had that many applications. But sooner or later, we're going to start getting the whole idea was to do some kind of case study review.
Good.
So I'd like to suggest and try to build something like that.
Good.
I don't think April 13th would be the time to do something like that, though, with the, working on our outreach. Surveys are supposed to be back on the day after that. We will be working, trying to contact all the businesses that want to talk with us.
And just compile, I mean, I know that they're going to be compiling the data, but I think we need to look at that very critically, at what comes through that survey. So that's going to take some time to do that analysis and put together a presentation for the public on that.
See how the agenda works out.
Yeah, I was going to suggest if I sat down with Dennis and maybe came up with a way of doing, say, even a 45-minute to an hour recap, whether it's a hypothetical case study, or pick 3 or 4 big ones, and just hit the high ones.
Yeah.
We don't have to write anything up afterwards.
What the zoning was, what the process was, and kind of what they were looking at.
So if it's okay with everybody else, I'd like to at least try and sketch some.
Let's try it. We can decide next time.
Right, we can decide next time. We can even decide, yeah, that's a great idea, but we can't do it on the 13th. Let's do it after the
Or
open.
do it at the end of the work session too.
And to me, that will help out with the open house, because I think one of the, to me, what's important is to get out all the zoning issues that are in front of the central area and have them kind of understand what's happening with the central area and how the zoning will impact or could impact their lives.
And my thought in bringing this up was it would also help educate us a little better. Julio was here, so he's got a lot of that history. Steve has a little more than the rest of us, but it wouldn't hurt for us to be up to speed on the last 2 or 3 years of major issues that came up.
I could probably be nice to work that into our the Saturday workday.
Let me tell you what I've got so far in terms of draft agenda for Saturday. First up is Suzanne, doing legal issues and procedures, and kind of for the planning commission. Here's what the planning commission does and what the parameters are for constraints and opportunities for the planning commission. Second is Jan Dickinson and Ernie talking about development issues and procedures. So here's what they go. So it's sort of a case study, but it's more generic in terms of here's what zoning issues and procedures. Again, Jan and Suzanne probably talking about, well, what's zoning, and rezoning process, and actually how's that work. Third, the zoning code enforcement, or fourth, zoning code enforcement. Pam Hall is the zoning enforcement officer, giving a little presentation in terms of here's what she's seeing, here's what she follows, the procedures she follows, here's what she's hearing in terms of priorities. Fifth would be code enforcement issues, procedures, focusing on the Northeast neighborhood. Marion and Mark talking about what they're doing in the Northeast neighborhood, how that's working, and what parameters they follow to what they're looking at. Sixth would be historic preservation. Andrea giving us an overview of historic preservation, and then follow up to what they heard before, plus more of an overview in terms of what procedures they follow. So we have to understand, what they go through. And seven, Doreen really wants to talk about randomness and how that works, and what the opportunities are for that. She's actually going to a conference this summer, which will, I think, expand her ability to do even more with randomness than we're able to do right now. And as we get more experience with randomness, I think opportunities for that will go greater and greater.
Dennis, could you get a draft of that out there, so we can start calling that over?
Of the agenda, sure.
I'd remind everybody of two things. Number one, we are going to have two new commissioners at that session, so I would think we're going to spend, certainly the topics you raised are a good preparation for them, but I think we're going to spend some time just getting acquainted.
Right.
Second is, as I recall from our annual session last year, we didn't get through the agenda.
Right.
So we want to consider.
And I've got more.
I know. I'm sure you do. That's why I'm saying, let's get the draft out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Talking about, Doreen just wants to briefly mention the panic button, how that works. And then planning academy demonstration. One thing Tom just mentioned briefly was go through kind of demonstrating, here's, what somebody, in half an hour or an hour, here's the demonstration of what we would do in 10 weeks, kind of covering all those categories of information. Then I have more, and I don't know what else you want to add.
Now we're here at 10, it's not 10 o'clock.
I was kind of thinking, and Tom's not here, but that maybe on the 23rd we kind of did that, and so it wouldn't be on the May the 2nd agenda, giving them that half hour to kind of do an overview on that. So instead of,
I think you were saying you need more like an hour, I think, to go through it.
well, when he gets back in here, it'd be nice to be able to,
Yeah.
Clarify that a little bit,
Yeah, either
Either
way,
maybe more time on the 23rd.
or
or
whatever.
the 13th too, or some other time, so.
One thing I liked last year was the field trips to downtown, and I thought that was really good. That was a good building exercise.
The other thing I'm thinking about, we have many field trips to other communities, and other jurisdictions that are dealing with issues similar to what we're dealing with. Arvada, Golden, places that have kind of situations similar to downtown Littleton. Is that something we want to schedule for sometime after the open house? It's something that we're spending time on at this point. It's something we want to be self-guided field trips where we come up with suggestions you can do on your own on your weekends, but like the restaurant.
Unless we're going for a directed purpose, something specific we want to go and check out. I think
Yes, we did.
it's kind of hard to work into our schedule.
I think it is too, that's real tough.
You didn't
But I
know.
think it's a valuable thing to do, I think.
I didn't see anybody from here.
Field trip from last year was valuable. I think
Who
it's
was that?
really good for us to go out
It was,
and look at.
no, Pablo's
downtown
fine.
Lowry or,
Yeah, I saw him. He was there for one day. He was only there for one day, and it's too bad. In fact, I should say that. Make a comment.
Annual meeting in a second. There's no reason we couldn't work something like that in maybe we split up in groups and we might have to do a walk around and lunch instead of in here. Which means we have to buy our own lunches. Those groups, we can afford it.
or do you want to get back to?
On the 13th, do we need to have a regular meeting long enough to elect officers?
Yeah, that's right. I think we need to introduce and that's the problem.
I think that's the first meeting post appointments, assuming that any of us are still here.
You said history is haunting you?
Like days. Something else, I lost track of it. Perhaps whenever it is that Tom makes his presentation, if we moved him to the start of the meeting, then he wouldn't have to sit through the entire thing if he wasn't interested or
not interested in that.
He of course can relax at home and watch.
And for the next meeting, I would like to also provide the recommendations from the, to the planning commission.
So when I have that in there,
Steve,
Steve,
do you want to do the resolution report too, Justin? Yeah, because we'll go out of meeting next week.
I doesn't have that much to do to our agenda or something.
Discussion on both would be good. And I missed the second historic preservation meeting, so I know we're going to first and not the second.
Myself, Linda, and Kurt were there at the second one.
Okay, is that far enough out for Elaine?
One,
Say this before I.
one quick comment. I had the opportunity last week to go to the Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute conference, and the only other person I saw was Pablo's for at least one day of it. He went on his own. I believe it was on the first day on the water. But I highly recommend that this next year coming up, that you all consider going. It's probably one of the best sessions of all the conferences I go to or have gone to. It's consistently the best, and you get great information about what's going on locally in Colorado and deals with all the things that we're dealing with. Not on a precise level, of course, but certainly things you can take home with you and pull together.
About the same time every year.
Yep.
March.
It's always early.
Yeah, and I even recommend our city attorney go.
I've been a number of times.
So it's called Rocky Mountain Land Institute?
Land Use Institute.
It's sponsored by DU.
So is this more focused on current issues that are hot or overdue or both?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Both. There's a legal track, a planning track. It's a major conference. I mean, the Land Use Institute is part of DU. It's an ongoing institute, but they have a conference every year.
I happened to go to one extra day where I wanted to go and see, I went to the water law review classes, and that was pretty interesting as well, because I have a personal interest in that water stuff, or the lack thereof.
Going back just a bit, when we were talking about field trips, it occurred to me that it might be useful to visit locations that had light rail and see what was going on there. Kay Watson in one of the venues mentioned, she's a realtor, mentioned, I think it was in Greenwood Village, what was going on in the vicinity of their light rail station.
It's amazing.
So maybe that would be, I don't know if we go to different ones.
Along the same lines, Tom Boone from Dr. Cog, he'd be a great resource for us to set up of what he knows and where we should go to look at some of the better ones up and down the corridors and stuff, since he's doing it for the entire metro area.
Either as group trips or even individual.
Whatever, whatever we decide to do, but at least he could, he knows that stuff like the back of his hand, so it'd be really, he knows them all, so it'd be really interesting to figure out which way to go.